Shalom, Siemi, Salama, Shalom. Greetings, my Israelite brothers and sisters from around the globe, especially here in America. Um, I wanted to take a look at something that we see here in America. And that's why I'm saying particularly here in America. And that's not to take away from any of our other brothers and sisters that is scattered throughout the four corners of this earth, because we are well aware of who our people are and our disposition amongst our people groups or amongst the nations. However, we know that America is always looked at as the, quote unquote, city on the hill, the light. And so, notwithstanding any position that our brothers and sisters that are in the house of Judah that's scattered, we can see who is in charge of the whole earth. And that's clearly the United States of America. So we see that financially, economically, militaristically / diplomatically. So no matter how you want to cut it, I mean, the earth, this world runs on the dollar. So we have to understand the significance of that, and we can't really downplay it because, see, these are the benchmarks that we use when we define eschatology and understanding the prophetic point of view of how we see this second Exodus, or I'd like to say greater Exodus, coming down the pike. And so I titled this message Second Lockdown and Greater Exodus. And I want to tell you and try to demonstrate and illustrate some points that will allow you to see what my frame of thought is in terms of what we're looking at. See, I think of it like this. I bring you the information. It's up to you to understand the information through the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Ruah, however you want to define it. Because the thing is that no matter what, you can't shy away from this because everybody sees this. Everybody sees what's happening. Everybody understands what's going on. And so before I get on into this, I do want to credit Teo Ministries, because there are some things that was talked about with Teo and myself on the back end. And honestly, I had this information from last month. I just didn't know when I wanted to do something because I was going to give respect to Teo if he wanted to touch this topic. And I think he kind of left it for me. But I see the more relevancy and importance as this time has gone by. And I also want to give a shout out to Brother Christian and Brother Robert, because we've been trying to tackle a lot of these philosophies and eschatology. And I would like to coordinate with Brother Robert and Brother Christian and bring them on my channel for a live, so we can kind of bring that to our audience, so they can hear the thought process of not just what we're saying, but it's really what the heart of the Hebrew and Israelites are, and awakened ones, Gentiles, are thinking in this time. And I would honestly say, the final hours of our captivity. So as I begin this presentation, I'm going to bring up a website that Teo had provided to me, and he just wanted to see my thoughts since I had previous military experience. And so I want to apologize because this website was a pain to try to get to have snipped or screenshot, especially on my MacBook, and to provide the actual context of what we're looking at. And so I want everyone to look at. And I'm sorry about the links and everything else, but if you see, there's one column that's kind of in the italicized gray on your left hand column, and then there's um, your middle column of the million figures, or the dollar figures for the US, and how that looks like in terms of the world figures. Because this is very important. I want you to take a look and just kind of understand the context of what we look at. And so I say Covenant Awakenings as we, because it's for me, it's an open-ended forum, because anyone, I would love to contribute, to provide, just as we're trying to do things within the space of ourselves as a people. We do things differently as the Hebrew Israelite culture. We're getting back to our roots, because we're getting back to the fact that we're not adhering to the individualistic society that it was a quote unquote greatest thing. Because you understand, the Most High doesn't look at individuals per se, he actually looks at the people. And if the people begin to be on one accord, then you start to see things taking place. And so, getting back to these figures, all right, so you see year 2017. And so take a look. This was last updated on 12 August 2020. I'm producing this video on 13 August around 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. All right, so let me just give you that timestamp so you can understand what I'm looking at. All right, so US dollar. All right, then you look at the year 2017. You look at the under the years, the population. The population was 327 million people. All right, that's important. That is very important. And now, if you skip down just a little bit, the gross domestic product is was $19 trillion. Okay, let's do some math here. Let's do some math here. Okay. When we had the coronavirus didn't really hit and affect the economy as much. We'll say, for optimistic purposes, the first quarter wasn't as affected with the coronavirus. However, later on in the quarter, yeah, it was definitely affected. So that first quarter, 1/4 of that quarter, and we'll get back to the numbers of the gross domestic product just based off of 2017's model or sample. So that's 19 trillion. Okay, so let's put on our thinking cap. 1/4 of 19, 25%. That equates to about 4.75 trillion. I'll just round it up to 4.8. Makes it a little easier. So, getting back to this math lesson. So we have 4.8 trillion dollars. We'll say came in the first quarter. Now, about a week or two ago, there was the article had come on out, and this totally came over everybody's heads because they blurb on out the truth so they can say that they're quote unquote not lying to the American public. It's just that they want to throw that on out there and say, oh, look at Black Lives Matter. Look, people are fighting. Because they don't really want you to pay attention to how the foundations are crumbling. I mean, I think we all kind of understand the smoke and mirror tactics for the longest, and now it's no longer effective. Okay, so when we understand that smoke and mirror tactics, now let's think about this. Let's think about this. The GDP between April and June or July, that's what they want to report. So that second quarter, that was a loss of almost 35%. Okay? 35% loss on an estimated quarter of, let's say, that 14 or 4.8%. All right, so if we do the math and we do the numbers, I'm just going to take the rough estimate. And for optimism's sake, okay, we're going to have a third of the GDP was lost. One third, valued at about 33%. So if you look at 4.8 and you see a third of it was lost, that means that the value was only $3.2 trillion. Okay. Now, if we go ahead and we use that same forecast for the third and fourth quarters, and we know it's going to get worse. So just kind of bear with me because we're just going to use this thing straight line. We see that we are about 9.6 trillion for the remainder of the year, as all things remain constant. So now we could actually look and see, let's think about this. We're going to look and see that potentially our GDP for this year could roughly be at the most, because we're giving generous, this is a generous estimate, at the most, the United States would have 14.4 trillion. And based off of the numbers from that 19 trillion, we've literally lost around 30% of our economy at the most optimistic model. Okay? So let's just keep that in mind. At the most optimistic model. Now, getting down to the forecast for 2025, think about what you see with this website at deagle.com. This website is it says it's a Air Force military contracting website, and it's used to forecast. It's a strategic forecast. And here's the thing. The government and the DoD, if they have a website, if they have anything that they publish, Let me tell you that publish, before that publish button gets hit, before that data is transmitted over the public sphere of the internet, when it's shown on the public domain of the internet, it's carefully monitored. So now for our forecast of 2025, it says 100 million will be the population of the United States. Somebody explain that to me. Somebody explain that to me. It says the density will go from 34 inhabitants per 1 square kilometer to 10 inhabitants. Okay, that's almost a 75% drop. It says here the gross domestic product. Listen to me. The gross domestic product will drop almost 80%. Think about these numbers, because here's the thing. I didn't make these up. This is what they are forecasting. And then our military budget goes from 637 billion to $32 billion. Do you know what that sounds like? That sounds like what the numbers were for post World War II Germany. I love to see a comment section, because I tell me if I'm sounding crazy, but you're looking at the same things that I'm looking at. So the question is, what happened to the people and what happened to the money? Let me bring this back again. What happened to the people and what happened to the money? And again, I'd like to say thank you to Teo Ministries for presenting this to me, because this was a very ominous warning that they put on out there, but a lot of people don't discern the times to actually see what's happening in front of our faces. So let me get to the second lockdown and greater exodus. So, what were we witnessing with the Defiance? All right, so let me just get on into here, because this is kind of my low lecture points. And we think that it was funny to see the Karens and to see all the crazy Brads and all the other bywords and paradigms that was used for the dominant societies, um, straight defiance of a lockdown. But you got to understand, everything that's done, the enemy does with a purpose. See, the enemy, you have to think about this. The enemy wants to survive this exodus in whatever shape, form, or fashion. See, you have to understand what Revelations is stating. You have to understand why they were cursing God and doing everything else in Revelations, why they were getting judged, and they were just saying, no, forget this. Their hearts were hardened, everything else was hardened, because they thought that they could, live through this and maintain something. And I believe is that chapter is Revelations 14. But what I actually believe is that you have to understand how the US models things historically is you do something first, as a test run to see how you will do the real run when it is time for that to happen. So you know how to put in your controls and boundaries and limitations to be able to handle that real situation. See, you can we never go into anything without an actual model or quote unquote war game of the situation to see how people respond. And now we can kind of see that based on these websites, and I have it right here because this came on out a couple of days ago, in early, well, around the 8th or 9th of August, and it was showing that the Federal Reserve was stating that the early release from out of lockdown actually created this dire economic situation that we're in now. Well, wait a second. The economy is like, you know, basically back to, or excuse me, not the economy, the stocks, the bonds, they're back to normal, even though 40% of these companies have either filed for bankruptcy, have either gone out of business, have either sold off or in some sort of a debt restructuring program. So where does that mean that something looks good here, but in reality it's bad there? We're not getting it because you have to understand this is Babylon at its finest. This is a state of confusion. And that state of confusion just doesn't rest with the economy. It actually comes also from the government. And we've seen that from the top with intentional miscommunication of, the virus is under control to, we need to get your kids back in school because we have the virus under control to, we get your kids in school. And now the virus is out of control because these schools are shutting down, i.e., the cases in Georgia and Mississippi. But I believe that the pretext to have the schools open was to allow for the failure to take place. Because when we see that there's a failure, well, now we have to make a more drastic measure to take corrective actions because we've tried to do things the way that our quote unquote experts had suggested. And now, now we're quote unquote in the election season. We're going to do things to better this economy, but everybody has to be in the pain for the what? For the healing of this nation. But what do we heal to? What do we restore to? Because what we look at, how do you heal and restore from 327 million to 100 million? Something doesn't add up. So the next part is, what does reparations have to do with it? Okay, so if you understand reparations in the context of reparations, we're now seeing these articles coming on out that, well, if you follow me on Hebrew Sphere, I mentioned an article from CNBC, and it was showing that the discussion and the talks for $12 trillion was on the table because, they're recognizing that we are in fact owed money, and that's 800,000 per household. And I say that's a slap in the face. But see, the thing is that they're admitting their sins, and once they admit their sins, then they have to admit their wrongs, and once they admit their wrongs, then they have to admit we're the people, and once they admit that we're the people, then judgment comes on them unabashed. And see, that's why they know they are literally on a slippery slope, but they understand that there is just a little bit too much power from our roar that caused this topic to be discussed in the first place. See, we got to remember last June when they had the congressional circus roll to town and they had their handpicked Negroes as a kneecap looking up for the handout. They were there to be paraded as a mockery to the idea of reparations. But you have to understand this is a double-edged sword. So there's a part that admits that we need the reparations. There's a part that's going to do what? Harden their heart to it. Which is where you're going to have more defiance because of the systemic racist attitudes that's been generationally embedded in this country. And on top of that, it provides a perfect cover or scapegoat for civil unrest. So I want to give a shout out to Brother Christian because as we were discussing the eschatology and how things align up, an interesting quote and conversation actually came about. And we had to understand, there's a lot of things that take place in August. And he brought up some really great topics. He said, listen, you know that the Nat Turner Slave Rebellion took place on August 21st. And he said the Haitian Rebellion took place August 22nd. Talk about ominous signs. So if we see that things are shaping up to where they're shaping up, at the very end of our 400 years, is this now a coincidence? See, I would actually argue that a second lockdown is needed to try to prevent the inevitable civil unrest. But we all know that the problem is once they say we have to go into lockdown again, I believe that's when all hell and Hades breaks loose. So we see that these things, it's no longer coincidental, but it's now what are we going to start seeing on a daily basis? What are we going to start seeing in these last handful of days? Handful of days. I always say, look, are we in the last hours, moments, minutes, seconds? I don't know. But I always like to I like to think about this because Jeremiah 9:24 has been on my mind that those that glorieth in the glory of the knowledge of the Lord, the knowledge of the Most High, and his loving kindness and his righteousness and his judgment. That's what we're supposed to be after. See, we don't need to be worrying about the bills, the groceries, and things of that nature. Because why? This is where our focus needs to be and seeing how the Most High's hand is going to move for his people. We need to be concerned about how he is moving with his mighty arm and how his glory is being revealed on this land throughout the four corners of the earth. See, we have to understand it is literally not by might, not by power, but by his spirit, saith the Most High of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, the Elohim, the Elimho, the 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 sovereign. See, we're on the side that wins, but that's not all. We have to understand what's happening so when we are up on out of here, we're taking account. We're taking a roster. We're taking a census. And we're telling our generations that are to come what the Most High did, how he did it, and where we're going from there. So, in conclusion, there's a lot of things that's going on a daily basis. And again, honestly, I don't know how long we have. I don't know how long I want to be posting videos. But I do like to give a shout out to, again, Brother Christian and Brother Robert, because we take a look at these things. Robert does his post. And if you look at covenantawakenings.com, Brother Christian has his book that you can download for free. And it's an excellent read because it gives a lot of graphical context within the book. Because honestly, that's how we learn. We got to see things. We got to see a lot of things. And when we see things and they're done in an actual organized, sequential manner that's illustrative, it makes learning easier. So I also have a Patreon. If you want to donate to that or the Cash App, I appreciate it. But I also would like you to check on out TEOTW ministries.ning.com and also HebrewSphere.com. I post regularly on there because the thing is, we have to start informing ourselves as a community even more because we know, listen, they done canceled college football, at least for the Big Ten, and looks like the Pac 12. And there's going to be other teams, other leagues following suit because this thing is real and this thing was never going to recover to the way it had been. And so, honestly, yes, take the time and look, take the time and see what's happening, how things are happening. Because that's our responsibility. Our responsibility is that when we wake up, we just don't say, oh, yeah, we're going to be millionaires, billionaires, quadrillionaires. No, no. Mm-mm. Think about this. Does a king ever wake up to become a king? No. Does a queen ever wake up to become a queen? No. There's actually a process to it. There's actually always a process to taking the throne. You have to first research who you are. You have to first research why you are there, what you are there to do, and who empowers you to be in your position. So think about that. All these kings and queens of Europe were quote unquote empowered to be in their positions by what? By heavenly authority. So if we're going to be empowered to take back our position by heavenly authority, do you think that we'll be ready to do it just by sitting there and say, look, I need my reparations, I need my money? No, no. You need to start being educated so you can start understanding how we're building this kingdom. And that's starting right now. We're in this kingdom building phase. But we can only do that as we go here and there to increase knowledge. I love that scripture from Daniel 12:4 because this is it. That's what shows it. Not increased knowledge of, the stats of the NBA. Not increased knowledge of, what stocks and stuff are moving because it's all manipulated anyway. All those things that we filled our heads with is even what Paul had said. It's dung. It's crap. But when we fill our minds and our spirits and our souls and our hearts with things eternal, guess what? The moth can't take it away. So, with that, Israelites and Gentiles, shalom, salama, shalom, siemi, and peace and blessings, Israel. And I will see you on the next one.